Here you go.
Good morning. We'll get started in about 3 minutes. We've got a few joining by Zoom members from all over the state. Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to we'll call this meeting to order, the Appropriations Subcommittee on Higher Education. We appreciate everyone for being here today. Chairman Chokas, would you open us in a word of prayer?
Mr. Chairman, let us pray. Oh, Heavenly Father, thank you for the ability to gather here in freedom and to be able to work towards the betterment of our future and to work as a group united in the purpose of serving the students of the state of Georgia and through them having a better future for the state of Georgia. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to Chairman of Higher Education, Chairman Martin, for being with us as well today. Some members are joining on Zoom. I know everyone knows this is a citizen legislature, so many people do have a day job during the period outside of January through early April. And so some are going to be watching a little bit later. Just a quick background that everyone in this room most likely knows, but that the Georgia Constitution tells us to come in the second Monday of January. It tells us to serve for 40 days, and we must pass a single law by the Constitution, and that is an Appropriations Act. And then in addition, in Article 3, Section 5, Paragraph 2, it says bills for revenue, all bills for raising revenue or appropriating money shall originate in the House of Representatives. So that's a little bit of the background of why we're here today, is so that we on the Appropriations Committee side can better understand, even though the governor and his team, and a wonderful team, I know we have many representatives here today of the executive branch, that the role is to propose a budget. And then it is the role of the legislature to review and to appropriate the money that's needed to do the great programs that we all work on together. So glad to have that. Chairman Martin, you have some words for us this morning.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to congratulate you with that medical degree and all the work you do, that you have turned into a constitutional scholar over the interim here. And I appreciate you. No, I do. I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Chairman. And it zoomed right past me that I could have had a Zoom option, but I'm glad to be here.
Glad you're here. We purposefully kept that from you. Thank you for participating. I want you to look people in the eyes and ask some good questions, but thank you all for being here. I'm glad Molly's here with me today to keep us on track for everything we want to accomplish. And I appreciate the work that's gone into some of the presentations today. With that, I believe we'll go on and get started. The first up on the agenda will be, Governor Chancellor Sonny Perdue. Thank you, sir, for being here. And we're very grateful. And wherever you're more comfortable, either at the table or the podium, whichever you're most comfortable at, sir. That looks great. Thank you for being here, and proceed at your will. Good morning, sir.
Well, thank you all. And I applaud you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Martin. In my experience when I was in the legislature, as you all are, and then as the governor, what I found was in the governmental budgeting process, it was all about the future. Very seldom were questions asked, what have you done with what we gave you last year or the year before? And that's kind of the way we took this, I think, from that perspective of showing what we have tried to do from a position of USG and the resources that you all have graciously and generously given to us over the years. So that's kind of the way I'm focusing on it. I want to go back also to maybe a time, maybe Chairman Martin might remember, but it was probably after my second reelect there. And what we would have, communities would come to you members of there, and they would persuade you all that they needed a facility, that their citizens had to drive more than 10 miles to get to another educational facility, and they needed one at home. And so we would see these ideas come up, you members, so all have been good, go to leadership, and you'd say, we've got to have my people need a facility right here in our community. And we got 3,000 people, we need that. So what would happen, it's only $10 million, Mike. And, it's only 10, but by the time well, okay, we'll do 10. We'll put in the budget in a pop-up way, $10 million. And then by the time it got designed, it was 15. By the time it got built, it was 20. By the time it got litigated, it was 25 or 30. in that way. So that's the way I've seen the capital process evolve over that period of time.
You've
So
seen
while I was
legislative
governor,
and governor and every other way too. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's an amazingly complicated and often repeated.
some of the things that we did, both for TCSG during that period of time and the Board of Regents, was saying these boards that are appointed here should, and their staff should have the best information about what is needed from a standpoint of these communities. And so we insisted that anything that the executive branch would look at had to come through a pattern of vetting by the Board of Regents or either the Technical College Board in that regard. And I think we got a much better product after that period of time. And I think that's really the process that we're operating on here today. So I applaud the fact that you all are looking that way. I think, honestly, we've got a great story to tell because I know how seriously that has gone. I know how our facility people dive down into that. I've got a bunch of slides. I can inundate you with looking at all these slides, but frankly, you can read them in that way as well. But I want to focus on just really a couple. On slide 4, a lot of times here we talk about the enrollment cliff. The good news is we have record enrollment again this fall. And obviously I brought a slide. If you look on slide 4, and that way, you'll see this is Carl Vinson internal enrollment projections, and they project out by 2029 we would have about 379,500 students enrolled. Interestingly enough, in the fall of 25, we're already at 382,000. That's on slide 4. In fact, we have another slide I asked this morning to see. We are projecting out through 2030, they're projecting 382,000, which is where we are right now. So really, we're beating the numbers in that way. We do believe it will flatten out that period of time. But the other thing I've been focusing on our team is when we're not here any longer, I want the people that not to be able to ask it, why did they do this? We're looking at the demographics over a 5 and 10 and 20-year basis over where the needs are in that regard. And so that's the way we're trying to manage the public's money in facilities. Obviously, growing requires more classroom space. It requires more dorms, and that's where the real challenge is today, is campus living. We believe that dorm living helps to retain our students and produces a better route to a 4-year degree if they're living there on campus in that way. But there are some challenges, and we've been somewhat limited by this Corvius concessionaire agreement that we had for a few years. Hopefully we'll be done with that in January, and we'll be free to make those kind of decisions without that kind of contingency in that regard. There's another slide I want to look at on 4, and then I want to just open it up for you, questions that your members may have. You gave us some questions, and this is slide 12, because I think this tells you a little bit about what we're doing here on slide 12. We've got, the University of Georgia and our university system, the USG was formed in 1930, so we've got some older buildings out there, and we're continually having to do. Thank you all for the maintenance, MRR money, as well as the M&O money that we have. But on 12, slide 12, you'll look back from the 2004 to 2012 area, and it shows you what new construction was versus what the renovation infrastructure was. And you can see how we've moved from 2004 to 12, 13 to 19, and now from 20 to 26 here, and focusing on refurbishing and rehabilitation there. The good thing for you all is that doesn't increase any more square footage because the M&O is on a formula, has the square footage there that is added. So we're trying to take these older buildings and refurbish them and do that. All of you know from a cost perspective, there's another slide in here I'll probably call your attention to on the cost of M&O. And Tracy, if you can tell me what slide that is while I look for it here, just on the cost of maintenance and repair is something. 7? On slide 7, it shows you what the formula is and what the actual cost is. Any of us who have property, houses, or anything else know that maintenance and operations have gone up, power's going up, repairs going up, trades have gone up. The formula calls for $8.28 per square foot for the formula earnings for our tuition, for our appropriation. The funding gap, you can actually see the spending averages based on the last 2 or 3 years is about $16.37 per square foot. So if we ever are courageous enough, Mr. Chairman Martin, to get into the formula, then that's probably something that we ought to look at from a right sizing perspective. Okay, all right, very good. So that I just need to point that out as well, and then I'll be happy to answer any other questions. I can filibuster all day long with all this, but I think from your members' perspective, be respectful. I'd really rather have a conversation, let you all ask the things that are on your mind about that maybe I have or have not covered here this morning.
Certainly, and thank you, sir. Obviously, that funding gap is being filled by, in what way now? Just by tighter operations, because you show and for those who can't see it, it's about the maintenance and operations is about twice what we're funding right now. I don't know when we have that conversation about the formula. I'm not sure if some people want it to go up or down or especially double. But go ahead. Where is that being covered now? Just through other efficiencies?
Operating expenses. You do what it takes. Obviously we got. And I've also been very proud. I think you all ought to be proud about the affordability effort that you all have been generous in supporting that, and what we've been able to pass that along to our students with, frankly, even the Department of Audits, and showed the fact that some of our students are paying less this fall than they did in 21, because you all did the special fee reduction there, and that was very significant that way. So we've been very mindful of that, but obviously just through efficiencies and taking that money from just general operations overall through the whole budget of the university system.
One quick question. I know you're not here representing Carl Vincent, and I don't believe there's anyone here from that. This shows a general flattening, not continued growth like we've had over the last 20 years, but it does show a flattening, but it really doesn't show this alleged demographic cliff. And this is the entire university system. Is that the contention? Is that because is it correct that in Georgia, the number of 18 to 22-year-olds will be going down, but more of them attending our university system? Or do you know, or is Georgia going to grow enough to where we really won't see that drop off? That's, at least we've all seen the demographic cliff projections.
Perspective, I look at it as market share. I think what USG and TCSG have done, Georgia Match and others, we're getting more of these students into the doors there from higher education. I think mostly they've recognized the value of higher education. While the whole world is saying a 4-year degree doesn't matter anymore, we believe that'll be proven false going forward in that way.
Plus, Georgia matches them with technical or other.
That's right, both USG and technical colleges, and just lets them choose where their best fit is, going forward. So they've seen growth. We've seen growth. We think it's market share. This we're going to be probably over 5% growth this fall for a record growth. Not only that, the main thing is record degree confers. That's the main thing. We moved after COVID, which was such a downturn, and the 2-year lag. Our institutions had to deal with some pretty tough budget cuts in that regard, and so we're out of that now. But what we're focusing on is retention and graduation, because that's the purpose of coming in those doors to start with. You don't put on your resume, well, I attended such and such. You put on, I graduated from such and such a university that way for your resume. So we think the retention numbers and the graduation numbers, we're seeing great upturns and good numbers on that as well, which gives me a lot of good. And these are hard numbers to move, actually. Most academics will tell you that retention and graduation numbers are hard to move, but we've seen a lot of good numbers in that this fall as well.
Well, I know Georgia Match has been one of the more impressive, the clarity that goes to the students as they reach their junior year, senior year of high school, to understand what their options are in state in Georgia. It's worthy of a hearing on its own, but let me go to Chairman Martin real quick.
Just
Since you brought up, I guess we might refer to this as the third rail of higher education financing, right? The formula. But just for the members of the committee that you might not be exactly aware of it, I mean, the issue isn't it, Mr. Chancellor, that you get the same amount to maintain a building per square foot for a 150-year-old building as you do for one yesterday.
Correct.
And so and that was the way it was done. How long has that formula been there?
83.
Okay, so at least 83. We have a lot better, isn't it true, if we're asking questions or if we're just, making comments, Mr. Chairman. But, isn't it true that, I mean, we have computers and planning models and predictive models that we really know what it costs to maintain and heat buildings. In the past, we didn't know that exactly. I mean, we couldn't predict how much it was going to cost to heat a building that was 50 years old versus one it is today. So it's past time, if just in that area. I understand there's educational things about how we fund certain degree programs more than others and so forth, but it costs, natural gas costs goes up. It should be something that we address. We had that a few years ago. Actually, Mr. Chancellor, it was probably when you were in the governor's office, when we had, maybe it was just after you left the Great Recession, when we had gas issues at the State Patrol. I mean, State Patrol had a budget and gas cost twice as much. After I think maybe you were here in Katrina, after Katrina, and they had to, kind of rob from Peter to pay Paul. So, Chairman Newton, it is time sitting at the higher ed committee and working with you on this, I think it is time that we look at that and try to get some more specifics. We have the technology to do it. I know you have people on your staff. I know the university system components have people on their staff to do that, to right size the way at least those things are done. There may be some subjectivity in the degree program financing and how that gets moved around, but what it costs to heat a building or paint a building or keep up a building is different. We know it. We need to acknowledge it and budget accordingly.
Appreciate those remarks, Chairman Martin. They're right. They're spot on, actually. And the good news is the improvement of data analytics. We have exactly that kind of data that can show you really where it costs and where it's gone compared to where it had been. So a static square foot there might be something you all may want to consider. It might be part of that formula that on the M&O that you could really bite off and digest, because on a small piece of it, yes.
Well, thank you, sir. I know we have some other data that you shared with us that I think is helpful in your slides. Did we have particular questions we wanted to go down? Sorry. Chairman Chokas.
Thank you, Chancellor. I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate what you're saying about the data. And this may be a little bit off the appropriation side, but what do you see as far as the interest in different degree programs and how that's been changing over the years? Could you just give us a little bit of information on that?
I'd be happy to, because that's a great pertinent question as well. What we're focusing on is really what is the ROI of a four-year degree in that way. And we're doing some deep dives using big data. Stepping Blocks is a Georgia company here that's helping us with some of that data, indicating that. So what we'd like to do is probably by this time, or maybe this next summer, have you all facts and data about what the ROI is per degree, per credit hour, and really it's a transparent issue for students and parents. The degree they're choosing, what is the possibility of jobs? What is the possibility of employment? What's the possibility of income in that way? So they can go in with our eyes wide open. We have some of that already with Georgia Degrees Pay, which is a good website that students can use some of that. But there's a lot more information out there that using real world data from alumni and where they've been out a year, 3 years, 5 years. So I met with a young man that had created Stepping Blocks this past week, and we're going to continue to focus on how we can get the ROI data that I think really responds to future policy decisions regarding education and other things. We're also working with the Department of Economic Development over shorter term credentials. Quick Start, as you know, has been a great thing for Georgia for many years. The Department of Economic Development has asked us to create a Quick Start-like program for University of Georgia, we're calling it Fast Track, to help them recruit the kind of companies that want those higher degrees currently coming into town. So whether that's short-term credentialing, the whole USG is getting much more nimble than you may remember it had been over a period of time.
Great. Thank you.
We did have some specific questions that had been sent, and I don't know if you were initially or if you have other people that might want to answer some of these. I'm glad to go over them with you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer them as you do. We
Got
submitted
two
that
extra
packet,
chairs if
and
you-
we can,
Sir?
we should have submitted a packet to all your members there with those answers, but I'd be happy to
Right. I've got a
answer
lot of
any of
them.
them specifically.
If you don't mind, yeah, we do had a couple of questions. One of which just with the headlines that are still going on today with the government shutdown, has there been any kind of a hiring freeze going on in the university system? Or is that just going along like it doesn't really affect as directly?
The news has been over the federal cutbacks in federal funding.
Mhm.
Honestly, our results show that the bark has been worse than the bite in that way. Georgia Tech,
Threatened the cutbacks on the overhead costs that were allowed, right?
yeah, some of them have happened. Now, that's still in negotiation. I visited with Russ Vogt and OMB there, and they were talking about 15% that way. I think we may wind up at 15%, but the definition of direct and indirect is going to change. And so much more is going to be allowed to be put into direct costs than indirect that way. So it's going to come out. There may be a little bit of a haircut, but for the most part, both the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech had record years in the second quarter that way. So the third calendar year quarter this year of revenue over funding for research. So we have to be careful from a hiring perspective. We do have, if the shutdown continues, we have a few programs that are funded by federal grants, and the governor's made it very clear, we've made it clear to our presidents that we're not going to try to supplant or replace the federal funding that way. So if it goes on for probably 30 more days, we may have some rifts in those particular programs that were federally funded and designed as a federal grant program in that regard.
Another thing that's come up, and I don't believe it was on our question list, but it has been submitted that there seems to have been over the past 20 or 30 years a growth in the administrative side of our higher education institutions. Do you know, is there any kind of a breakdown regularly done when we talk about maintenance and operations or demolition or even new on the amount of space or square footage that goes for administrative support arrangements versus actual, I don't think you can divide it, if you call it academic space or not, but is there any effort to look at the potential that admin costs might have been growing faster than the straight academic costs?
Facilities, but personnel as well.
True.
We're seeing that.
Vastly more even on personnel. Yes, sir.
And I think
Is
that's
this a
going,
target? I mean, I won't call it a target, that's probably, but is this a point of interest for you?
it is a point of inquiry.
Inquiry.
And,
Thank you.
What we're doing with our space utilization is looking at, our board has asked the very specific questions that you're asking over that, from the growth of administrative staff versus classroom staff in that way. So those are the things that we look at on an ongoing basis. I think some of those answers in that packet we'll probably have in the space utilization, should have some answers about that. But if not, we can get more specific information for you.
Thank you, sir. Correct. Yes. And I do know one of the other questions that had come up was across both TCSG and USG, there are obviously institutions across the state. You mentioned a previous way some of those came into being was an influential local legislator, and that, I'm sure that doesn't go on at all anymore. But when we look at that, aren't there some facilities that aren't seeing the growth? They may see more of the demographic cliff that is predicted for some areas. And if so, are we doing anything either to redirect individuals to those locations with the programs that are needed, or is there a point at which we'll look at transitioning some of those? What's your thoughts on programs that are growing? And of course, that the previous 5 years and the next 5 to 10 years may be different, but Or is there a way to redirect some of the programs to get the growth to where it is more evenly spaced and some schools don't have excess space and some don't have enough that needs more building? Could we potentially shift that?
Particularly a real world problem. We talk about USG as a whole, but it's not equal across all the sectors, and you've identified that. This last year, I think most of you are aware that we made the decision to take East Georgia College in Swainsboro, Butch Parrish's hometown, and let Georgia Southern manage that campus. Honestly, I'm convinced that the people, the students, in that area will be better served in that regard. We were trying to have a college with less than 2,000 people that way, and that became, I thought, inefficient in that way.
Are you able to see an administrative overhead reduction when you do that kind of a
Yes, we will definitely in that regard. You don't totally eliminate, but you reduce structures that were to be duplicated that way. Like M&A, you've got to have some kind of efficiency in that way, and we see that in higher education. But that's been going very well. That's just an example of an answer to what you've been saying. But we look all overall. Let me give you another answer to that, in that when we went to test optional after COVID, what we saw was our access colleges, the students had been going to access colleges, then started going to our comprehensives like Kennesaw, West Georgia, Georgia Southern, and Valdosta in that way. Now we've chosen with the fall of 26 to go back to, we didn't stop it with our R1s. We still had Augusta, as you know, and Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, and Georgia State having test mandatory. But we're adding two more schools to that. We're adding Kennesaw and Georgia Southern as a test mandatory for fall of 26. We think that may slow down maybe some of the growth in those two and add to some of the areas where we need to pick up. One of those being in Douglas, Georgia, and Waycross, South Georgia College. We still don't have the enrollment there that we need, and we're looking at that very closely in that area. It's not really an area for any type of consolidation there because it meets a need in an area of Georgia that demographics have slipped in that area, and we're doing a hard press on recruitment to get those numbers back up in that way. But we do have some of those pockets there across the state that we're looking at and managing those kind of things. There were two examples, one consolidation and one mandatory testing of therapies that we hope will get more students in our access colleges.
Thank you. I know, by the way, we do have Vice Chairman Franklin on Zoom with us, so feel free to chime in if you have a question. One more question for me. One thing you mentioned earlier was it's a previous, I'm sure in previous administrations, it starts at 10 million, then it's 15, then by the time the legal fees are over, it's 25. Is there anything that we've done or you've been able to implement to get the board, really the Board of Regents, probably more so than just the chancellor by himself, to ensure the accuracy of project cost estimates to where, I mean, I don't know if anybody could have imagined some of the previous 4 years of inflation and built those into their, but I know we have some construction in my area, which I'm sure we will be seeing cost increases that are going to have to be dealt with. What does the board do if you got to,
Actually,
other than just add a big fudge factor? I mean,
I came in April of 22, and my first statement to these cost overruns that we were experiencing as a result of COVID was over. And that
I'm tired of hearing it.
Yeah. And that we would be looking at we brought our architects and our designers in and said, when the legislature appropriates $50 million, we're looking for a $50 million building, not coming back for wanting, 10 million more or 15 million more the next year. So we've been bearing down there. There's a slide in here, I think, showing that I think we've had less than 5% cost overruns in that way. If you ladies can help me find 13, there's a slide in that way that shows our discipline cost control exactly to your question on slide 13. only 5.1% of the 58 state-funded projects required budget adjustments. That just didn't happen, Mr. Chairman. It was like kudzu before. And we've taken the pruning shears to that. We've sent out to the designers as well as the contractors and those people that when we say we want a building for 50 million, we want it designed for 50 million, we want it built for 50 million, occupied for 50 million. And so I think it's paying off in that regard, but I can't tell you how many conversations we've had about that. And I want to, one of our recent retirees, Sandra Noyes, was a real champ, and she and her team worked extremely hard to get that message out. I think we've turned the corner on that, but you know what the cost overruns during that COVID, and we felt like COVID was being used as an excuse for a while.
Thank you. Yeah, and getting close to 95% with no budget adjustments was not an easy task, I'm certain. These are very helpful. The packet of information you've given us is certainly strong. We may have other questions that come up during this, but I do think this is a helpful understanding from how the university system is approaching educating the workforce of the future. Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chancellor, I should say, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. Mr. Chancellor, we've talked about this in our committee before, and I won't say anything good came out of COVID, but what COVID did show us is some folks like to, especially in the adult learning area, like to learn remotely. And I know you've the system itself is trying to do that with providing that option. Just as we go forward, I would just love to investigate that further. I know nationally, I know the professors, I know the university presidents think on campus. You mentioned living on campus, but there's a demographic of folks that need to work because of while they're at least getting started, maybe until they get into their majors. So I know you're doing some work, you and your staff are doing some work in the right places, in the right areas on that. And I applaud you for that, and would love to see us, further look at our clientele, the people that we're trying to serve, the non-traditional students that have life going on and want to do a class, online at 8 o'clock, a bit like the non-linear things that Governors Western or Western Governors does in the private sector. Because this summer I've been with a cohort of folks from the higher education around the country, and there seems to be a move toward being able to provide that level of education. So again, thank you for doing it. What we've done so far, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for us to continue to excel and be leaders in Georgia in that.
Thank you for mentioning that, Chairman Martin. There's a slide that specifically addresses that in the packet that you have over the modality, and much of that growth in remote learning has been the population and the demographic that users experience. A young mother, maybe single mother, maybe married, that can't leave her job, has 2 young children or whatever, and but she wants a college education to progress and can study and learn it at night, and to do that remotely and also asynchronously, where you don't have to be there right there with a lecture, but can get done. So we're doing our best, because that's a huge component of this growth that we think is out there, Chairman Newton. We calculate about 1.4 million Georgians that have been stopped out and had some college but did not finish. That's a huge target audience for us in that way, and they're going to moved on to jobs and other things. They're going to need those kind of flexibility for learning that way, and we're providing that the best we can in that regard. You'll see some of those numbers. We're also doing even more than that, Chairman Martin. We're trying to also make sure that remote learning is still as valuable. These students are being as successful on their boards and tests afterwards as making sure they're getting a quality education as well, not just checking the box.
Just to follow up a little bit on that, both non-traditional and all, the work requirements have been in the news over the past several months. They certainly has been a part of Georgia's encouragement pathways program for when it comes to healthcare and a work requirement, or qualifying activities is what they're called. You either need to work 80 hours, 20 hours a week, or volunteer 20 hours a week, or get training. I'm curious if which entity is actually in charge of Georgia Match, and is there a potential that Georgia Match could also reach out to people who may not realize that they're eligible for some programs, some training programs in Georgia, and now with the federal government maybe adopting, I'm not sure when that goes into play or not, but if the federal government adopts what we call a work requirement, but once again, training is a key alternative to actually a paying job, as far as the ability to get taxpayer funded benefits, but with an expectation of, say, 20 hours a week. Is there a way maybe Georgia Match could also look at that group of people to say, hey, here are the things you're eligible for? Just because I've been so impressed with Georgia Match, I think that would be to learn of their educational opportunities.
I don't know that we've addressed that specifically. The provision that you're referring to actually was a law in 1996 that Clinton and Speaker Gingrich signed. I dealt with
welfare, ending welfare as we know it.
Yes, I dealt with it when I was Secretary of Agriculture over the work requirement. It had simply been ignored most of those years, and that's one of the battles that you see on the shutdown right now. It's never been enforced regarding the work requirements, and one side thinks you shouldn't, and the other side thinks you should. But it's already in law, and what you just said. But your idea about reaching out maybe in new strategies, if this indeed comes to be enforced that way, I think it will be an opportunity for us to reach out to those citizens who can get more training, whether it's in technical college or the university system, and provide that qualifying exclusion there for the SNAP program.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, you've got a couple of slides that if you don't mind going over with us, I think they'd be educational for our committee members, both the ones who will watch later. But slide 11 looked like it delved into your capital project evaluation.
Right.
And then kind of coupled with that is over in 14, where you talk about strategic space management. You mentioned your attention to academic versus administrative space when it comes to that, not just space, but also manpower. If you don't mind, on slide 11 and 14, if you don't mind giving us, you got a well done slide packet that I think it will do a good job having you.
In the interest of time, did not filibuster you all this morning, but I'm happy to address that. I fear that I've already offended my staff that's done such a good job putting this together.
It's impressive.
In that way, but you're exactly right. There's a robust process for capital evaluations, and it begins at the institution. They first of all have to tell them what program is going to be there, where the need in the community, what the job opportunities are, and what's the space going to be used for in that way, and bettering the economy of their region that they're serving in that way. So that's how it begins. They've got a rolling 5-year program that way, and then they submit that to our staff. The staff does a lot of vetting about the validating their information that they submit that way about they're going to make it sound the best they can, obviously, and so our staff kind of
trust but verify, I believe was
verifies maybe is that way. In that way, and also looks at, as you indicated, we've got some growth areas and we've got some growth areas that are not growing quite as well. So what's the future need in that way? So we look through that. Sandra and her team did a great job, and we've got a young man that many of you know, Frank Smith, is replacing her, who had been with the state properties, a real professional, been with the state over 20 years. So we were delighted to be able to secure him as a replacement in that way. But they go through this vetting process. Alan Travis actually goes down and looks from the square footage perspective. They do some amount of re-engineering or value engineering on that. Do you really need 100,000 square feet? Or will, based on what you say you're going to do, what 80,000 square feet do? So we try to right size those projects, and then we put them in a priority order that way, for which the Board of Regents then looks at all the requests and then has the priority order of what the staff has recommended by institution, all 25 of them now in that way. And then the Board of Regents gets to make the final recommendation over what programs they want to propose to the governor and to the Office of Planning and Budget to put into the budget in that way. So that's typically OPB will give us a bonding amount that is that way, and we match what we're able to ask for with those projects that come in that way. So it's a very robust. I think you all would be extremely proud if you could watch that whole process go through.
So that capital project evaluation, and feel free any members chime in. One thing down there on the bottom of it was renovation priority. Once again, renovations preferred over new construction unless necessary to conserve resources. Two things I see come up. One is Chairman Martin mentioned is that the cost to heat and cool a 50-year-old building, 150 is a little different, but a 50-year-old building, 150-year-old building may have some historic advantages that you don't want to give up. But certainly a 50-year-old building, renovation preferred, it does keep the formula from going up. And if you're not growing, if your system or your particular institution is fairly flat in its needs, it could save some money on the maintenance and operations. How does that renovation priority over new construction? When you say you try to prioritize or it's preferred, how would that work? Would someone look at, there's a proposal for a new building from an area, and then is there a team that goes and looks and says, well, you got these other buildings, roof's fine, everything inside is dated, but how do you actually the team?
This team goes on site. They're all over the state and looking at with the request and evaluating them that way. Right. The other thing that we haven't mentioned, we mentioned M&O. We haven't mentioned MR&R. You all have been very good about MR, and most of it is HVAC, roofs, and those kind of things. So we have to modernize those kind of environmental.
Lighting and HVAC can save money, but you got to invest money up.
That's right. That's what's done on MR&R. And you all have been very generous in MR&R, but as you well know, there's a huge backlog of deferred maintenance in that way as well. It looks like, the more you put in, the more it shows up what needs that way. So, we won't ever catch up with it, but you all have been very good in the last couple of years since we've had cash to deal with in plussing up the MRR. And we've been using that very wisely to help make those buildings more efficient environmentally than exactly what you're talking about. But just on that slide on 11 there, you mentioned it flowed into the slide on 12 showing the.
Just one second. Let me see if Chairman Martin is still on 11. Go ahead.
I was just, if I could, Mr. Chancellor, I know, again, talking with folks around the country, sometimes the cost of the HVAC replacement, that's one of the things, there's some lighting replacement that, there's a capital cost, but it saves over time. I know there's companies out there, there's private companies that make a business in doing that. And I'm not trying to, promote one or of the other, but I know we have in the past in the state used them in various areas. Is that something the university system is looking at? Because I know it has to be a good deal for our system to do that, but there are people deploying capital in that way because interest rates are so low. There are investors that are just happy to get a low ROI that would save us over time. Is that something?
Those Chairman Martin. You have to be very careful, though. There are people out here that I call it like the federal budget. We're going to save $10 billion, but the savings is going to come in the 10th year. That kind of thing.
2050. No, I understand, and I trust somebody else will find the right way to implement that. Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's
Last question. If I can.
Chairman Choke is certainly, no, we'll get over to maybe to slide 14 in a minute, if you don't mind, sir.
Okay, well, I'll wait for the last.
Oh, just the strategic space management slide was very educational appearing and did look maybe as describing a little bit of that we touched on admin versus academic, data driven. Could you speak a little bit to that, the current practices to that? And then we may have one more question on other states, and are there options that the board ever looks at on funding, or we're anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. Could we go over slide 14 if you don't mind? It seems pretty.
Again, the data is a real thing. The technology of data, sensors and optics and those kind of things are amazing that we use, and energy usage and that kind of thing. We talked earlier about identifying when there's a request for new, when we do our space utilization. Is it for administrative purposes? Is it classroom space? Is it education space? And helping to determine whether that would be where that would fall on the priority list in that regard. So that's analyzed. But the data, Georgia Southern's doing a great job with some of their preventive maintenance. There's some new vendors that we're using, Chairman Martin, on the optics and the sensors there, helping to see when a pipe is hot and those kind of things, and making preventive maintenance that way. They were really looking at pilot projects in other places, but Georgia Southern's done a good job in utilizing those type of technology here in the data-driven management area of our facilities.
Thank you. A different part of data would be the, and I hate to keep harping on it, but the admin versus academic. Do the schools, the institutions know where they stand on, say, a ratio of academic versus admin space? Is there an effort, is the bottom half encouraged to prioritize academic space renovation as opposed to administrative? If it turns out they're more heavily weighted, or do we know how our institutions stack up when it comes to or maybe you're correct that the operations is a bigger deal than the space anyway, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Since we're looking at space today, I thought that was one area that we could address, just because there is a feeling that admin has grown faster than academic space in the last 25 years. And I could be wrong, but I
disagree with you. I think that's probably accurate. I don't have the numbers to show it with you. We can get those numbers on that. What I would say to you is most of these institutions learn indirectly when their requests for academic or administrative space is not prioritized, and their request for academic space is prioritized. That's the best way to teach what can be funded.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any other questions. Chairman Chokas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chancellor. It's great to see you again. Two things I wanted to say was, first of all, I appreciate you coming down to Georgia Southwestern in my district for the ribbon cutting of a new facility. And what impressed me most about the facility was the fact that it had real world implications. It was a learning library that mirrored exactly what the new workspace is of the future. And then the second thing I wanted to say, and thank you as well, is when our past president decided to find another university to work at, you sent a great interim president, Miss Teresa. She did a wonderful job down there. And so we're very grateful. And then, of course, with Michelle, you've done an outstanding job through choosing and bringing and growing within the system. And she's doing an excellent job. And I personally am grateful for the care and attention you've paid for our school.
You could give my comments this morning based on that renovation of the James Earl Library down there, the Carter Library, and the renovation of modernizing library. Libraries, as you all well know, are not what they used to be. And we've got the stacks out, learning areas and that kind of thing. But it was a great renovation. That was another value engineered program. If you remember, Michelle mentioned that. Then we made that fit into the amount of money as well in that way, and came out with a great product. You saw that firsthand, so you ought to be able to tell my speech this morning.
Yeah, and let me just kind of repeat. And I had the opportunity to go to Sage Software, and the workspace there, which is on Ponce, is brand new. And this is the exact same type of workspace that we the university system did at Georgia Southwestern State University, so the students can actually see the workplace that they will be working in the future when they graduate. Thank you, sir.
If Ashley, if we could go back to slide 16, I'm going to let you just sum up a little bit, if you don't mind. That was your last slide. I think that does hit on some of the high points we've discussed. If you don't mind, just since your staff did such a great job, I think it gives a good summary of some high priorities, some things that we're going to follow up on a little bit later. But if you could, if you didn't mind, on slide 16.
Capstone's what we've been talking about today. We showed you the not only the refurbishment, but also we're literally doing away with some buildings that are no longer serviceable in that way. We've gotten in some of that slide deck is how much money we've spent on the demolitions in that regard, and that obviously takes it off that square footage M&O as well. And then we also just went over the data-driven decision-making over the environmental choices of space use, whether it be administrative or academic. And we're trying to let our demographics of our planning looking out forward over what do we need. My staff will tell you that oftentimes we say, I don't want somebody here in 10 or 20 years saying, why did they do that? Because we're trying to make wise decisions now based on not just where we are today, but looking out and where do we expect to be? I mean, we want to skate to where the puck's going to be in that regard from a facility standpoint. Because once you plant these things, they're there, and you either got to use them or they don't. They're not that way. So we also made a big thing over the renovation, adaptive reuse as well. So that's why I think I'd love for you all to come over and go through with our whole facilities people a process in that way. I think you'd be very, very pleased as I am with what's going on.
Well, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your team, the Board of Regents as well, and the effort they're making. Certainly, we're trying to be good stewards of the appropriating process. And certainly we have a lot of attempts, or at least conversation about lowering the tax burden on Georgians in certain ways. We want to make sure that we understand the appropriations process, the needs that are there, like my children who've trained in the system, our children and grandchildren. We want the future readiness that you describe on slide 16. I think I appreciate that diligence. I appreciate that we'll have some follow-up conversations. But sir, thank you for being here. Thank you to you and your team. You got a great one. And
thank you for calling out some of our slides that hopefully will get me out of a little hot water with my staff who did all that work.
they did a good job. Thank you, sir. And with that, we're gonna transition over and welcome Commissioner Greg Dozier and his team with the Technical College System of Georgia. And we're going to learn about some, and of course, we're focused a little bit on the appropriation process and capital projects and today and how those are decided. Certainly, we've had a booming discussion. We've overlapped with Georgia Match, the program that spans both USG and TCSG. So, Commissioner, welcome, and thank you for being here today with your team, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do have several team members with me. Penny Haberly here is our CFO, and she can bail me out on any of the numbers you guys may ask, and I start stammering. And I do want to recognize somebody who, like the Chancellor said, put their heart and soul into this presentation and any of the data that you get after this presentation. Brendan Bowens over our facilities. Brendan, if you'll raise, there you are, right here behind me.
We got him.
But he has really poured himself into this presentation. And I think, like the Chancellor said, we have a great story, and that great story really is direction by the governor and you guys, along with our administration. I think the last couple of years, we have really all worked hand in glove to make sure we're maximizing space for the future. The other thing I'd like to start with, the Chancellor mentioned it, but we were proud just yesterday to do an interview, and if you listen to WSB, hopefully you heard it, but we, for the first time in our history, had over 1 million credit hours this fall semester. So enrollment continues to grow. The workforce pipeline of the future continues to look positive. In addition to record enrollment, we set the highest number of graduates we've ever had this past year as well, with over 46,000 graduates throughout our system.
That echoes what the Chancellor said about it's not just how many students start, but how many actually finish.
That's right. There is just a little fact, and I don't know if his system shows this, but I would guess that it would be similar because we kind of track very closely. Back during the Great Recession that you mentioned, that is the time in TCSG's history where we had the most enrollment. We had somewhere around 180, 190,000 students, and it made sense. People were out of work. They were looking for a way to actually skill themselves. The Pell Grant will also help cover cost as well as living costs. So there's a reason you had so many folks in our system, but we had almost half of the graduates. And so the efficiency of today and the effectiveness of our 22 colleges, the presidents and the staff out there has just been amazing. I'll jump into the presentation, and we tried to answer most every question you asked, and we have a packet we can give you afterwards if we miss anything. But we tried to do our due diligence. And so real quickly, the very first thing is just a reminder of our system: 22 colleges, 88 campuses, 35 career centers when you look at our workforce side of things, and 5 quick start training facilities. Just this week, we did the ribbon cutting on the Hyundai training facility down there. Phenomenal facility. So if you're on your way to Savannah, would like to stop by, we'd like to showcase that facility. So please take us up on that. And it's a facility that you guys funded and something that you should be proud of that we have in this state. It's truly making a difference. Next slide just kind of gives you an overview of really how we saw the questions that you guys posed to us. And we saw it in 3 areas, and it's really all around facility investment and that investment into our facility, how it powers our Georgia workforce. We think there is a correlation between enrollment and the focus that you and the governor have put on making sure the training areas for our students replicate and resemble state-of-the-art facilities that they're going to work in when they go out into industry. So thank you for your investment. Those 3 areas that we'll cover is M&O, we'll dive into it, MR&R, and capital outlay. So when looking at that, one of the questions you asked, and we tried to narrow it down just to operating funds. So just to give you a feel of the color of money, when you take out all of our capital appropriations, the bond projects that were typical and now are cash, if you take those out and just look at operations, about 46% of our funding that we operate on is state funding. 18% federal, and 36% other. That other is primarily tuition, fees, things of that nature. Also, one of the things that I won't have in this presentation, we'll be looking at our credit students in a minute and the projection you asked for. You'll see somewhere around 160,000 students in that. In these fees and other funds, we have another 180,000 or so students that are self-paying, either through industry paying for them or they're coming in not tracking on a credit, meaning they're not walking out with college transferable credits, but they're still leaving with a skill. And so when we look at that footprint, it's double what you see in the credit side of the house, which we tend to focus on in this committee more than we do the non-credit.
How do you measure if they end with a skill, but there's no certificate? Do you count those as a
So we still give them a certificate. It's just not a transferable certificate for future college credits.
Right.
Now you can come back and apply for prior learning and get some credit. So there is a way to navigate that. The next slide just dives right on into M&O. Currently we have 2, and we only focused on the maintenance and operation side of the formula, but just like the chancellor, we have 2 sides of our formula. One is driven on credit hours. We talk about that a lot. That's the largest portion of our funding. It's based purely on enrollment and in the 5 buckets of credits that we have, and it's a different funding level for those 5. You guys and the governor really supported us on making a slight change in that had a huge impact. I don't want to say slight without making sure you guys know that, yes, you guys focused and really started that ball 3 or 4 years ago to really make a difference in nursing, CDL, and aviation. And that has made a huge difference on that side of the funding formula. On this side is purely for us a square footage.
By the way, without that, there would have been incentives to expand lower need programs that than
That's right.
than what are actually higher need programs in Georgia from the industry perspective and the job potential. But financially, there would have been a strong incentive to expand the ones that weren't reimbursed like that.
Exactly.
And so I appreciate that.
And Mr. Chairman, also, you can see a direct increase in enrollment in those programs related on the funding that was provided to enable us to expand those programs.
Thank you.
And so it's been really phenomenal. On this side of the formula, we get funded purely on our square footage in the BLIP system, the state system that's over at GBA. That current rate for us is $4.15. When you look at that, that covers anything that's not personal services. The funding formula, when you look at credit hours, is to hire those instructors and staff and faculty. The M&O side should cover anything from maintenance, utilities, custodial, landscaping, security, alarm systems, anything, paper towels, anything that you think of that's not the hiring of the faculty and staff falls into the $4.15 on the other side of the formula. We get asked every year, and we keep updating it, and it's been pretty consistent the last few years. Our actual cost in that area is a little over $12. That's the $12.56 you see on this slide. The question you asked, and you asked the Chancellor earlier, is how do you manage that? Well, I'll go back to kind of what the Chancellor said. We just have to make it work. And how you make
deferred maintenance, I hope.
Well, the reality is we'll talk about deferred maintenance in a minute, and that's really hard to pinpoint, but we'll talk about industry standards in that area and what we believe happens there. But on this side, what you're really doing is you're taking your tuition, you're taking your fees. You may not be hiring everybody you need to hire because you got to make it work.
Okay.
And so you are taking the monies that are available and maximizing the true operations of that college. And I have to give our college presidents and their staff a lot of kudos, because I always tell them, I've been blessed to be part of several state entities over my career. We operate more like private sector than anywhere I've seen, where we're taking in revenues, different colors of revenues, and then we're maximizing based on the mission and vision we have of truly having a globally competitive workforce and getting folks into those needed jobs that are out there. And they do that by taking those revenues and saying, how can we get those graduates? And so that's how they make up that difference between that 4 and 12. And we'll continue to look at that. The question was, when you look at it from a global aspect, that $4.15. Right. When you look at the technical education operational cost, our total cost, that $12, $183 million, the color of money is 33% funded based on that $4.67% based on the other funds I was just talking about. The next section is MR&R. You've seen this money through the appropriate. Yes, sir.
Question. When you say 33% is funded by the state, you had this graph on, well, your second or third slide.
Yes.
So the three colors of funding. Is some of that difference made up by either the red federal 18% or the green other 36%?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
that's how you make those numbers work
That's
without
right.
getting into dire straits from a facility standpoint.
That's right.
You try to find your presidents try to find other sources of.
And we help them manage that from the
Innovation.
system office, but absolutely our presidents are the front line on that, and they're leading their college based on how do we balance this. When you look at MR&R, the 24 million, that money has, through the appropriation cycle, moved a few times. And so over the years, you'll hear me in a minute when we talk about our capital planning process, that our planning number from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget now is 76 million. You'll have heard a few years ago it was 100 million. It's really apples to apples when you look at that, because what happened was for a number of years, this 24 million was included in the bond package. And a few years ago, before we started cash funding, you guys started cash funding everything, that 24 million was moved out of bonds into cash. And so the 76 million is really the same as the 100 million. It was just, what color is it? Is it bonds or is it cash? We've been very consistent on that number. It hasn't changed for a number of years, and that is an area that we have to manage very closely, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. If you flip to the next one, when you look at, one of the questions is what is the standards across the nation in this area? We use something, the Critical Infrastructure Needs Assessment. And so what we have done is we've gone through and looked at what is a priority 1 end of life and what is a priority 2 approaching end of life. And to give you just an idea of what that means, our personal homes, when you put a new roof on your on your house, you're buying a roof that has a warranty of 20 years, 30 years. The end of life, when you see priority 1 end of life, that means just like many of us that had put a roof on that had a 30-year life and we're in year 31, but the roof is still functioning, that's how that 88 million's there. So I don't want to mislead you and let you think that that's a dire strait, but it is a risk, because that means, you know, tomorrow we may start having problems and need to replace it because it is at or past end of life. Priority 2 means it's getting close to, if it's a roof, it's getting close. It's year 28 of that 30 years, but it's still functioning. So when you look at this, we know that we have somewhere around in priority 1 and priority 2, $158 million worth of potential risk as far as facility goes. Obviously, that's not all covered by the 24 million. It's covered by all the shades that we talked about, and the one that we haven't talked about, which is capital funding and renovation of projects. The next slide talks about the industry standard for facility funding. So this is our need. This is what industry says is best practice. It seems a little aggressive to me, but this is what y'all asked and we found it. So.
Best practice, that's not pipe dream. That's their best practice. That doesn't mean it's the average of what the institutions.
That's right.
50th percentile or something like that.
Yeah, I believe
a
it.
Different slide.
Yeah, I believe it's an APPA standard that they come out and say that, you know, you should have somewhere around the cost of replacement value around 2 to 4% is what you see in there. If you looked at that, we've used a figure of $350 a square foot of a cost of replacement. That would be somewhere around $7 to $14. That's not something that we've ever asked for. That's not something we honestly have fully looked at until you guys asked the question. So this is, I don't want you to mishear me. This is us trying to answer what the industry standard is based on the request that we received. The next slide shows what in that same APPA study, what is the impact of deferred maintenance. It's really hard to say what has been our impact of deferred maintenance. So we went to the same study that we just presented you. It talks about that facilities funded below 2.5% of replacement value could enter a crisis mode. Campuses where higher reactive maintenance spend 10 to 30% more annually, and planned funding reduces energy use, extends asset life, and stabilized budget. All that makes sense. What I want to give you is kind of a feel for how we kind of manage that. So when you look at just daily operational costs and break fix that they're using the formula, the $4 for, as well as other money, they're doing that every day. The MR&R money that you guys appropriate every year, the $24 million, we bring it into system office. We take 14 million of that and we spread it across our 22 colleges, 88 campuses, so that they have a budget.
It's pretty thin when you divide it by 88, doesn't it?
Very much.
Yeah.
And then we hold back, but it all goes to the colleges, 10 million for emergency. So those end-of-life projects, a boiler, a roof that all of a sudden is dying and the college doesn't have money. When we get that emergency call that we have to fix this today and we don't have the funding for it, that 10 million goes to those projects. It very rarely ever happens, but it has in the past. If we don't spend all that 10 million before the end of the fiscal year or right before it, we then send that money to the colleges. We don't keep that money at system office. It is for the colleges. It is for their replacements. But typically we spend that 10 million and then we have to work with each college on how can we help each other. We have, you know, we have a system where we're begging and borrowing and then fixing, and that's just part of the process. So that's the reality of daily when you look at how do we manage it? Having said that, we're very proud of our facilities. We believe they look good. There's always things we need to do, and we're making it work. The next chart shows just our process. And when you look at our process, it was very similar to the chancellor. And he is correct. Back when he was governor and I was in OPB, we entered a process to really try to have a standard list of projects that had been vetted. And that way, when it got to you guys during session and you were looking at that list, you had confidence that it was a project that, if funded, could come to fruition. And so when you look at this, it's pretty elaborate, just like his. We have at the college level a planning and data collection process. We have a proposal and development process that then flows up to Brendan and his group in system office. They review it then. We go in, and I'll show you in a minute some of our prioritization. It goes through our systematic prioritization. Once we've done all that and get the list, we submit it to our state board for approval. One of the things that we do is we go through that process for every college, because we did do a transition about, 6 years ago, that renovation takes priority. And we were seeing some of those small cap projects not making the list because they were almost too small for a true bond project, but they really needed some more MR&R money that we just didn't have. We've gone to a vetting where our colleges go through this process for a large cap and then a small cap project. And that way we have the board, we have this whole process go through that. We have our board review it. And then when we do our submission to OPB and it ends up to you guys, we have a list for each college in both of those categories so we can really assist them. Once we've done that, obviously, Office of Planning and Budget, the governor, General Assembly review that. Once it's been appropriated, and I'll show that in a minute, our partnership with GISFIC. Every project we have, we partner with GISFIC to make sure we're managing it appropriately, and then we do a review. One of the things you asked, and it's not in here, but obviously we'll provide it, was a look back to 2022 to 2026 on projects. During that time period, we had 40 projects that were appropriated by the General Assembly and supported by the governor. Those projects, in just round numbers, were right at $660 million worth of projects. The question that you asked us was, how many of those ended up being overrun? When you look at it, we had 10 of those 40 projects.
What were your dates again that you're?
2022 to 2026. Is memory serving me right, Brendan? 2022 to 2026.
It's sort of over.
Yes.
Okay.
Of those projects, we did have 10 that ended up coming in with a need of funding above what was appropriated. Of those 10, 7 were funded internally, meaning we did fundraising at the college level, moved money that they had saved up for other things to help fund those projects. And 3 of those ended up back in front of you for additional support. Those 3 that came back before you, some of those were unique. One of them was a project that originally started as a new building. During the appropriations process, it was determined we need to do a renovation. We scaled it down, missed the mark, had to come back and ask for some money there. Another one was a project that kind of started off as a local project with communities that we were part of. We ended up adopting that as our #1 project. As we went through it, the scope and scale just changed, and that's no excuse other than it was one that didn't go through the normal process. And then another one we just missed. Another one, the infrastructure inside the actual renovation of the facility was much larger in scope and scale than we realized on the front end, and we just missed it. And we have one this year that will be before you that kind of fits that. You guys were very kind to fund a renovation project at Georgia Northwestern up in Rome. It was the main building and 2 small buildings. When we got into it, the wastewater treatment was collapsed. Everything had to be replaced underneath it before you renovated it. And as a result we were able to renovate the main building, but the 2 small ones we just weren't able to do based on the infrastructure needs when we dug into the project. And so I think when you look at it, it's The total cost overrun was $30 million, but it was less than 10 million that we had to come back before this body and ask for additional appropriations. So our colleges, once again, want to give them credit from local fundraising, local refocusing of internal funding, and really making projects happen. Next slide, Mark. Optimizing existing space. Now, I'm excited about this. I'm not excited that you see it says 2026 priority, but I want to expand on it a little bit. We have really been, with Brendan's leadership, trying to maximize the question you have. In BLIP, our state system for all agencies to track our assets, we do categorize it. Penny was looking up while the chancellor was speaking. We do categorize it as admin space, educational space, so we can get that for you. I don't have it today. But I can tell you this, the renovations that we've done in the last 6 years, the only admin space that we've even been renovating or adding has been counselor and guidance space from memory. I may miss that a little bit, but I can tell you our prioritization's been on classroom and students and growing enrollment.
I would imagine your ratio of admin to academic is different.
Yeah, yeah. I would hope so. I would hope so.
Thank you. We'd love to see that.
Yeah. The one thing I do want to share on, I'm really excited. We had several of our colleges, Georgia Northwestern being the lead college, who took on an opportunity and really led it, honestly. Dr. Popham up there really set the tone, but she brought in a group to do a scheduling of classes. And that sounds so simple, but I want to expand on it. When we looked at the data of when are our classes, our in-person classes scheduled on our campuses, this will make sense. When do you want to teach classes? 10 to 2. That makes most sense. When the students need to take classes, much bigger space. But this project's a little more complicated than that, and that's why I get excited about it, is they came in and took all of our existing students that were enrolled and mapped the course of study they were doing, and then matched up and said, in order to optimize the students' time and scheduling of classes, this is how you have to schedule the classes. So today a student may need 3 classes. My daughter's, I won't say where she is, my daughter's in class. She's working on a 4-year degree, but it could happen in ours. I'm not knocking my counterpart because I'm talking about us right now. But the panic she had because she needs 3 classes and couldn't get but one of them next semester, and how that may affect her graduating on time, is a real thing. And so I'm watching it real time by my daughter, and I'm seeing Dr. Heidi Popham up there implement a system that says, I want to look at every single student and what it takes to schedule to maximize the shortest time for them to graduate.
You could look at it and try to maximize the use of your space by spreading out classes all day long. That would not meet the needs of your.
That's
client
exactly
customer.
what we're doing.
And even though it would be from a space point of view.
Yep.
And so you got to balance those somehow. You want to be efficient with your
That's
space,
right.
but you want to let the starting point be, what does the student need?
And we know it works, Mr. Chairman, and that's exactly what we're doing up
You're
at
able to
Georgia
do both.
Northwestern. Sir?
You're able to accomplish both
Yes.
efficient use of space. Chairman Martin.
Yes.
Well, this could happen because in the university system, I think that you have adjunct professors that do other things. But I know in your particular area, you have folks that are teaching in our that do other things.
Yes.
So, I mean, just as we address that in your system, let's just talk about that. Maybe not today, but how the ability of those folks to be available, because we can't get the professors the other way. I mean, I remember this. I go back 20 years on this committee, and I mean this respectfully when I say it, but when we're trying to build nurses, teach nurses, I refer to it as build, and I mean no disrespect by that, and it's very respect. We were limited in the folks we could get to teach nursing classes, and somebody's working
Still having that.
today, and so we have that. So I know that factors in at your level. I suspect it also factors in at the university system when they're adjunct professors. But it goes back to what we talked with the chancellor Purdue about there's a new world out there. There are folks that are in non-traditional students, and then there are traditional students, if you will, millennials, that want to learn from midnight to 2 a.m. because they're going to do something during the day and they're going to play ball in the afternoon, whatever they're going to do. But that's a bad thing. Millennial and pickleball doesn't go together. I'm sorry, whatever. But so talk about that. And then the last thing I'm going to say I'll pause here to say this because I respect our teachers, our professors, our adjunct professors, but the students are the customers.
Absolutely.
And I know you're saying that. So when it comes down to, we've got to deliver. I mean, if not but for the customers, the professors wouldn't have a job.
Yep.
And so when it comes down to what Chairman Newton said about the folks need the classes in the afternoon, well, I want to teach from 10 to 2. Yeah, well, I want to go to the beach every day, but I live in the middle of North Fulton. So
Yeah. And I want to make sure that I'm not misheard either. We have some of the hardest working, full-time instructors and faculty, as well as adjuncts that, I mean, I'd put them up against anybody. So what we have found up there at Georgia Northwestern, we're implementing this system-wide, by the way. We're in the process.
Data analysis.
Yep. But what we have found is once you make that hard decision, Chairman Martin, on when's the smartest time to have classes and how do you look at those adjuncts in their schedule, the reward comes from full classes in graduation. And although it was hard on the front end, it's really been very rewarding for everybody on the back end. So it's not a knock on anybody. It's if you ask me what I want to do, that's what I'm going to do. But once you realize the impact you're having, it's a celebration. And so we have had more student count at Georgia Northwestern. I don't want to mislead in the next statement, but what we have found through this is we have more student count, but each student's taking more credit hours than they were in the past, which shows we were putting a barrier there that we probably didn't even realize. You asked a question and also asked the chancellor this: are there differences across institutions? And I really hadn't thought about it till you asked the question, Chairman Martin, but the number of adjunct instructors differs across our system based on availability of those to teach. And so it's interesting, colleges that have more adjuncts than full-time, well, that's not fair, have a higher ratio of adjuncts to full-time, and have some flexibility that they can do that others can't. But it's also a hindrance because, to your point, most of them are working multiple jobs and very limiting. And so that is one of those differences as we look at maximizing, we have to take into account. The other thing you asked about was online. The second box on this PowerPoint shows you that all of that's taken into consideration as we look at governance. And eCampus is our online platform, as well as Blackboard. eCampus is our global system platform where we share instructors and we can share space. Blackboard is our in-person or on-campus solution for virtual, where we can do some of the same things. So we're not only trying to maximize space at each college individually, we're trying to maximize it across the system by shared instructors and, in some case, shared lab space. And so it's been we're at an entry point on that, but I believe there is some real advantages and opportunity in that area. The next slide shows you really the prioritization criteria. And obviously enrollment growth, space utilization, facility condition, and modernization. The third one's my favorite: alignment with high demand workforce. Governor says it all the time. You guys say it all the time. We don't want to just be the best state to do business. We want to be the best state for talent. We believe TCSG and our partners are part of that, but we can't do it if we don't have that as the prioritization. And you see that in our request to you. When you see projects come in, it's typically, not always, but typically 99% of the time, it's going to be focused on a high demand skill and making sure we have that opportunity. Project readiness is an importance, and projects are funded based on contribution to systematic outcomes. So we're really trying to put data behind our request, and we're trying to make sure that the outcomes are connected to what the state wants. Next slide talks about a lot of project management, and I won't go through all of this unless you have specific questions. But the biggest thing that we do is we really try to partner. Years ago, we tried to do it a lot just internally. We got the money in, give it to the college, you guys manage your project. Sometimes that's more efficient, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get great results, sometimes you don't. We really have teamed up with GSFIC, GBA, and they pretty much, we put all projects down. There are a few little small things that doesn't go through GBA, but any renovation that's of any major type level, any project, we partner with them. They're great partners. They come out and make sure that we're using a CM at risk process, which combines the architect and the construction manager at the very beginning so that we don't have scope creep and confusion on what's going on. And we truly both together manage that project with the goal of keeping it in scope and cost. And I believe based on the data I mentioned earlier, we've been very, very successful in that. So Mark, if you'd go to the enrollment outlook. You asked a question and actually have a meeting, just talked to David Tanner last week about coming over and talk to me about the demographic cliff data that I have seen, but I just want to go through it again with him. You know, we have seen incredible growth, and what you don't see on here is what I just announced to you when I started. You don't see 2026 data, even though we're still in 2025. We're in the academic year of 2026. And so we're over 1 million credit hours. You're going to see next year an increase again, over 160-something thousand students. If you look at credit hours, these numbers won't match exactly because this is head count, but if you look at credit hours, 2023 represented a 3% increase in credit hours. 24 was a 10.6% increase in credit hours. 25, which you'll see in the budget this year, was a 9.4% increase in credit hours. And right now, just for fall, it'll come down once we have our other semesters, but we're about 9.9% increase in credit hours right now. And so while we are all concerned about graduating high school seniors, I believe because of the retooling, the reskilling, the need to make sure that the jobs that are of today are prepared for tomorrow, that our numbers can continue to grow. Just to give you an idea, as we ask for projections from our colleges each and every year, those projections typically come in at a 3 to 5% increase. And so far, we've been surpassing that each and every year. Going back to your original question on the demographic cliff, there's different studies out there. There's one that the Southern Regional Education Board uses and looks at the entire U.S., but specifically the 16 states that are in that compact for education. Georgia is projected in that study to have a reduction in graduating high school students by 2041. So the window's a little bit longer.
Say that again. Start from the reduction from when?
It's from today till 2041. So by 2041, Georgia would see a 1% decline in graduating high school seniors. That's not quite as dramatic as what we've seen in other studies. What I'm trying to mirror up is what's the time frame? Is that time frame shorter and the bell curve has had time to recover from a shorter time frame? What we also know in a lot of the studies is migration is not taken into account also. That's just looking at the current students in the educational system. So it's not bringing into account folks who move to the state. So while I do believe we have to prepare for that, I don't know that it's going to hit our enrollment like some may think. I think we're actually going to see with the jobs that we bring to Georgia, the reskilling we have to do, the excitement around good wages connected to technical training. I believe that we're going to continue to see a growth, although I do think it will plateau just like, or slow down, plateau just like the chancellor said. So that's kind of how we're seeing growth in the future, and we're still chasing that every day.
There was a question from Vice Chairman Franklin that regarding what do you think the reason for the exponential growth is? Is it just doing such a good job, or is it the team is doing it?
Yeah, yeah.
Something,
I think
is this being mimicked across the South, the Southeast, for example?
you are seeing excitement in two-year technical programs, and that's one reason you see us working so well with the chancellor on trying to find pathways to those type of hands-on skills. But I think it's twofold. It's the cost. Georgia's been a great state on having affordable, accessible college through our technical college system for years. I believe it's a belief in the jobs that you guys and the governor are bringing to the state. When you have companies come in that have career paths and high paying and opportunity to really advance, and that's what we're seeing in this state is the companies that are locating here and expanding here, the skills that you can get through your technical college, they can make money that matches what they never thought they could make.
Who's in charge of getting that information out to the potential 11th grader, for example?
Everybody, but we really take ownership in that. Our colleges work in every single high school and middle school actually to try to start at that level. One of the other things is you mentioned Georgia Match. Your question on Georgia Match, I think is very doable. We are continuing to look at what's the next, and I say we, the governor, with his cross-agency panel, continue to look to see what are the next steps of Georgia Match. Georgia Match, to give you just an anecdotal kind of connection point, Georgia has always not fared well on graduating high school students coming to two-year colleges. What I mean by that is the national average was somewhere around 12 to 15% of graduating high school seniors go to a two-year educational pathway. In Georgia, we have traditionally been at 7% or lower.
That's not because we have more going to a 4-year program.
No.
They're just
We're
not going.
missing folks. Since Georgia Match, we've climbed up to 10%. Now, can I say it's 1 for Georgia Match? I can't. But I have to believe that we were 7% consistently year over year over year, and Georgia Match came in, and we're at 10% now. So I believe the marketing and the awareness and everything is just amped up. But I'd have to say this, if we didn't have jobs at Match, we wouldn't have the enrollment. So kudos to just Georgia making sure that we have opportunities for our young people to really make a great living.
Chairman Martin.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of a walking on the edge kind of thing. I understand
Chairman Martin, walking on the edge.
I could have Zoomed.
Thank you for being here.
But I mean, I think this is important to do this. I mean, again, the students and the outcomes, which are both good, from what we're doing. But sometimes it worries me when we talk about worrying about enrollment going down. If organically, if there's less I'll say kids, I shouldn't do that. Less students, less traditional students, less non-traditional. I mean, we've got to be nimble at your institutions. I mean, we've got to do that because this is not a, create a demand for it. I mean, to keep people, I'm just going to say it, to keep people employed, to keep something open. It's to create outcomes. I mean, if one day we decided we could teach half your classes the same way, get the same outcome, pass the same boards, and do it off campus, we ought to do that because it's less expensive for the folks to do it. Sure. And so I want to make sure we balance that. And look, sitting here as the commissioner and all your presidents out there, that's tough. It's tough all across the country. I've heard that in the meetings I've been in across the country that, as people go out, I mean, you'll get to this thing and it's not in your system, but in the university system, they'll say, but the more people that come in to do this, if they then don't want to pay for the gymnasium at the school or the extra fee in school because they're not coming, because they'll say, I'm a virtual student, so I shouldn't pay for that. Well, how do we pay for that? I mean, we've got to deliver educational opportunities, not create things that pay for the infrastructure. And I think doing that, I just want to keep encouraging you to do that and support you in doing that, because that's the way we drive, I'll say cost. I'm not going to say inefficiencies. Oh, whoops, I just did. But, that's the way we let inefficiencies creep in, is when we start worrying about the machine, not the folks that are using it.
I fully agree. I think it goes back. It's such a hard thing to do, but as we continue to evolve, I do think that at some point that formula discussion with both of us has to be there. I mean, you know, not to dive too much into that, but when you look at a funding mechanism that's only based on enrollment, it's not fully incentivizing what I want, our college presidents want, you guys,
Outcome.
we want outcomes.
Yes, sir. 100%.
And so it's, it's one of those things when I'm sure it was put in, it was a lot of thought put into it because we had never had a formula. I think ours went into effect in 86, if I remember right. No, 91, I think. We came in creation in 86. We got our formula in 91. But at some point, the funding formula should actually match the outcomes that we're all striving for. And I'm real proud of what our presidents, I'm real proud of what our system office does. We keep that forefront, but the money doesn't always match what you're pushing for.
I'm going to say this because I think, and is there anybody left from the university system? They might have, okay, so I didn't want to, actually, I'm glad you're here because I don't want to say this with you guys not here. I don't think we fund you at the same level when you're teaching like comparable things, maybe in the health world. I think we fund you. Do we not fund you at a lower credit hour as you do at the university system for doing the same thing?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we just need to realize that. I mean, if we're making a tricycle here and we're making a tricycle here, but we're funding this tricycle manufacturer, but they're making the same, we just got to understand that it's 2025 going into 2026. And maybe the university system shouldn't be getting less. Maybe you should be getting more. But we've got to realize that the creation of that is, I mean, it's comparable if we're getting the same results. Now, I don't know, do your folks pass the board as good as they do? I don't know that. But
they do. There's differences in what they teach.
We've just got to look at that eyes wide open if we want to have outcome-based results and funding. And to my friends at the university system, that is not a pointed thing of you're getting more money than you should. It's just that, if we're building nurses, it costs this much to build a nurse. And if we're doing it at TCSG or the university system.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, just a quick piggyback. I know you're getting pretty close to next to the last slide and appreciate you getting to that. But just to kind of piggyback a little on the e-learning, it's kind of a two-part question, if you don't mind, because you're probably most likely, your people may see it the most, and it may be a work in progress. But we just came out of the COVID years of students going on Zoom, some serious, at least in the education K through 12 world, I think, I don't even know if they've recovered what they lost during COVID. Certainly those students are now graduating. They're coming to your colleges. Kind of two questions. Has that caused a problem because of the a little less prepared than maybe 4 years earlier, the same student coming out of the same school that went there 4 years in a row in person? Now there's some, two things. Are there some students who just don't learn over remote learning? And by the same token, are there some that do and can learn well and therefore could be implemented in the TCSG? I know not the hands-on aircraft repair, CDL, or nursing, those kind of things, but in some of the others, are there students that do better and some that do worse? And is there any science on that? And, you've got Khan Academy, you've got these things out there that are try to get you mentioned sharing instructors, maybe even sharing space between your institutions, and maybe your best XYZ instructor is in West Georgia, but there's students in other places that might like to take a 5 p.m. Zoom class. I'm just curious, are you seeing a challenge from those who learned through Zoom or maybe didn't learn through Zoom? And then second, are there some, and I use Zoom, e-learning, is that the proper term?
No, I mean, it's just the platform we have.
But just for that, is it an opportunity out there for you to share, or are there some students, is there a way to test a student to find out they just, maybe I'm too distractible and I'm not a good candidate for remote learning?
So I don't have the data science behind that to answer specifically. I can answer anecdotally and just recently had a conversation with one of our presidents on dual enrollment in online learning. Yes, I mean, the answer is there's some folks that learn great online. There's some folks that struggle with it. There's some folks that probably are not paying attention while they're online, and you got to have, our system does have checkpoints and all that good stuff. But this is the interesting thing. The data is becoming so much more available, and this was Georgia Northwestern. I'll give Dr. Popham credit again. She's got the scheduler system in that gives her a little more data analytics that they can really dive into. And we often hear about that Math 1101 is the toughest course for folks to pass. But for her dual enrollment students, when they dug into the data, it was actually English 1101. And so she's put in a different system for those that are online and in person to make sure we have success, and those that are struggling with online to talk about in person. And that is one of the things that we are blessed. We have lower student count, and therefore we have smaller class sizes in our system. And so that's one of the things that really TCSG is able to do, is put some more hands-on specialized look at a student that is struggling in an area and make sure that they focus on it, get the learning capacities, the foundations they need to be successful in the future. Chasing that just a hair, when dual enrollment came in, and you go back and look at those studies, there was 3 reasons dual enrollment was important to the state of Georgia, and now is important to the nation, because honestly, the nation's looked at Georgia and wants to replicate that. But dual enrollment's goal is a less expensive way for post-secondary education. It was to look at, can we get students to the market quicker, or find their purpose sooner and have them in the workforce? And then the third one, which I think was the key one, and I did it last on purpose, but it plays into what I just mentioned, was, can we show students they can be successful in post-secondary education while they're still at home, while they're still under a superintendent at a local high school, as well as a college, having kind of oversight or support for them. All 3 of those have played out to show that dual enrollment has impacted all 3 of those areas. And so we have learned from that, and we apply that strategy throughout our system, especially on the success side. So while I don't have the data, we know that it in fact is there. But as we get the data, we're putting in methods to really support those students for success.
Chairman Chokas. Yes.
Commissioner, talking about dual enrollment and some of the things that you brought up, in the past, it took a while for us to attract the students, and the average age of the students was a little bit higher than it was in other institutions. Do you see a trend in the opposite direction, or do you see the numbers about the same? Do you see the average age staying at about the same because of career changes and they're already in the workforce? Well, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm going to miss this number a little bit, so we'll have to perfect what I'm about to tell you. So don't hold me to it exactly. About 10 years ago, our average age student was around 34. And we have been blessed. Some of that was purely as we saw dual enrollment growing. That population of student coming into our system offset our older student. And so over the years, we've continued to see it decline. And so overarching, we're somewhere around, and this is where I can't remember exactly. I want to say we're below 24 years of age now is our average age. I think it's 23 and something, but I'm going to have to go get that number and make sure I'm not telling you an untruth there. But I believe it's in both categories. Dual enrollment has grown and helped that, and I don't want to negate the impact that had on our average age student, but also the fact that I said we went from 7% to 10% of high school graduating students coming into our system. We call that, we're first choice for that 10%. And we're starting to have those students look at us at an early age as well. Now, having said that, I hope we never go away from the retraining, and we have students as old as they want to be to get retrained so they can advance in their skills and advance in their earning potential.
Share a personal comment, if I may.
Certainly.
With
This is a conversational committee hearing. Thank you.
and I'm sharing this with an experience I had with my children as they were getting close to graduating and throughout their careers in education. The older students acted as mentors. And it was interesting, especially my son, because he enjoyed college a lot. Anyway, and as some of his friends were graduating, it really motivated him to go ahead and buckle down and get that degree behind him and get in the workforce. So one of the things, because I was around when we were talking about dual enrollment, we were concerned that it may have the opposite effect, that the younger students would not be influenced in a positive manner, but in a negative manner. But I'm seeing from my own personal experience that it had a positive effect on the younger students because they can actually see what their future will be like.
That's awesome. Thank you.
A key takeaways slide that if you
Yeah, just it's just a recap of what we covered, Mr. Chairman. We really do believe that reliable M&O and MR&R funding is not just a funding thing, it's an outcome thing based on the success of our future pipeline. We've talked about that today. We've talked about we want to be data-driven on what we present to you guys, but also to our citizens. We've talked about being strategic with the taxpayers' investment, and we are truly focused on our mission, which is the workforce of the future and changing lives. And we believe that, just want to thank you for this discussion. We always spend a lot of time on the other side of our funding, talking about the formula and the classes we're providing. We don't always talk about that foundational part, which is what we've been talking about today, of really having the facilities and the capability of having a job-ready student, because we don't think about our students walk out, they go into the industry. I don't like saying this, but it's true. We warranty our students. If they're not job-ready, they can send them back to us. And we want to make sure when they walk into that industry, they walk in and they outshine those that didn't come through us, because they're job ready and providing return on investment immediately to that employer and to the community. What we've discussed today has a big component of that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate Chairman Chokas, Chairman of Higher Education. Chairman Martin, do you have any particular comments? I appreciate your participation and
I share with Molly. I didn't, but since you asked, I would just thank you guys for putting this together, both the university system and TCSG. I know y'all have a busy time with putting together the governor's budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting this together. I've always said in higher ed, we in this committee, my committee and your committee, we have an opportunity to impact people that impact people.
Yeah.
So I really feel like the job you do, Commissioner, and the job that the Chancellor and his staff do has a tremendous effect on 11 million Georgians, either directly or indirectly. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll just say, we work hard between systems to get rid of barriers. And so
I appreciate
our
it.
two systems are really trying to connect. And every day, I was looking at, Dr. Ivan Allen sent me some stats the other day. We had 1,600 students that either went through dual enrollment or came through Central Georgia Tech that are now down at Middle Georgia College working on their four-year college. And I just love it that whatever a student needs, wherever they're at in their educational journey connected to their workforce career aspirations, in Georgia, we're doing everything to open up that pipeline.
Well, I'll echo what Chairman Martin said to you and your team, to USG, changing the trajectory of our our youth, our young people, changing the trajectory of their lives is your mission, and we're here to support that. I appreciate the valid and excellent information that both systems have shared with us today. I think it'll help us do a better job in our role in that Georgia Constitution that I opened with, and in making sure you have the tools you need, your team does. Thank you for being here today. Thank you all for participating. We're adjourned.
Thank you.